Hello everyone, Branch here. How's everyone doing today? In my last video, I talked about how I think Roxy could potentially be one of the most valuable agents for your account throughout version 3.2. But after thinking about it a little bit more, I might actually be wrong. What if Roxy is actually the bait? Because today, I want to talk about Lindverne Sunbringer and why I think she could potentially offer even more value to your account than Roxy. Now, before we get into this, obviously take everything I'm saying here with a grain of salt. We don't have Lindverne's complete kit yet, so this is based on speculation and the direction Hoyoverse has been taking with his characters. But here's my thought process. I feel like Lindverne Sunbringer could end up being a very similar archetype to Roxy, and if that's the case, then we might have a situation where Roxy looks like the incredibly valuable character to put forward in version 3.2, only for Lindverne to come along later and basically do the same thing but with even more value for your account. And this has become even more interesting if Lindverne ends up being the first Void Hunter with a support-oriented role. Because if she ends up being a support, stun, or defense type character who provides the same kind of utility that makes Roxy so valuable, then suddenly the question isn't, should I pull for Roxy? The question becomes, is Roxy worth pulling when Lindverne might be right around the corner? And that's a very different question, because when you're talking about limited characters, especially if you are F2P or low spending player, it's not just about whether the character is strong, it's about opportunity cost. If Roxy is incredibly strong, but Lindverne can potentially fill a similar role while also providing even more utility, then pulling Roxy could potentially leave you with less flexibility when Lindverne eventually arrives. And that's why I'm starting to question whether Sigrid is actually the bait character here. Maybe we've been looking at this completely backwards. Maybe Sigrid isn't the bait, maybe Roxy is. And you might be asking, Branch, how can you be so sure that Roxy is going to be the bait character? Well, okay, let me explain my theory first. First, let's take a look at Sigrid and Lindverne Sunbringer's faction. Both of them are part of the same faction with the Roskalifer, the Airspace Patrol Department. And guess who's in charge of that faction? That's right, Lindverne Sunbringer herself. Now, that alone doesn't really prove anything, but here's where things start getting interesting. If you have Sigrid, you might have known that Sigrid kit has similarity with Pyrois. Sigrid can deal significantly more damage when enemies are in contaminated state, which is pretty much the same as Pyrois left branch ultimate like we already discussed in my last video. And if we look at Lindverne's character design, there's another clue that caught my attention. Her shoes have this wing-like design attached to them, and if you're familiar with Greek mythology, that immediately reminds you of Hermes, the god of messenger, who is famously depicted with wings on his shoes. Now, when I look up the connection between the god Hermes and the wind, this is what I found. So, here's where my theory comes in. What if Lindverne is going to be a wind attribute character? Now, obviously, this is speculation. Wings on her shoes doesn't automatically mean she's going to be wind agents. But, when you combine that with her position within the Airspace Patrol Department, her relationship to the faction, and the possibility that she could fill a similar role to Roxy, I think it's at least worth considering. And then there's the matter of Sigrid Drive this set. Sigrid doesn't have a drive this set exclusively designed for her. All this time, we have been using sets like Down Bloom, Hormone Pong, or Puffer Electro, and I think I might know why. Every time a new character with a new class or attribute is released, we usually get two drive discs. One designed for the new agents, and the other that can potentially buff older agents. So I think Sigrid Drive this set will be released at the same time as Lindverne Sunbringer Drive this set. And this new Drive this set we get from Lindverne Sunbringer set will potentially buff not only Sigrid but also older agents like Ellen, Hugo, and maybe even Hidari. And then, if we look back at the Tea Party scene, we can see Lindverne Sunbringer's weapon pretty clearly. On the left, we have Sigrid's lance or spear, on the right, we have Claret's blood axe, and in the middle, we can pretty confidently guess that this is Lindverne Sunbringer's weapon. Now, look at every wind agent we have seen so far. For example, we have Felina, who's using a giant fan. And if we look at Roxy's leaked video, we can see that she's using what looks like to be a giant metal coven. So we can make an interesting observation here. Wind agent seems to need some kind of large weapons to create those huge gusts of wind. Felina with her giant fan, while Roxy with her giant metal coven. And now, if we look at Lindverne's weapon, we can see that she's appeared to be using this big short sword. So, could this potentially be another clue that Lindverne is going to be a wind agent? Obviously, this isn't definitive proof. But when you combine this with the other clues we have already talked about, I think it's another interesting piece of evidence for the theory. But what do you guys think? Is Lindverne actually going to be wind agent, or am I just reaching with this theory? Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. And as always, play responsibly, don't spend more than you're comfortable with, and most importantly, enjoy playing ZZZ. And that's all for me, folks. If you like this video, like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. This is Branch. See ya.